Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Nicaragua webinar entitled Brave Women, Strong Women, Power and Protagonism in Nicaragua. My name is Barbara Larkham, and I'll serve as moderator today along with Nan McCurdy. We're looking forward to our featured speakers who will describe what they experienced and learned during a delegation in January. We'll introduce them in a few minutes. We want to thank Yoav Elanevsky, who's providing our technical support, and our many organizational co-sponsors who are being listed now in the chat. The webinars are hosted by the Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition. Before we begin, we have a few requests and announcements. You'll see several buttons available at the bottom of your screen. One button is for closed captions, CC. Just click it to turn it on. Also, feel free to use the chat function to offer comments throughout the event. But if you have a question for the speakers, please don't put your question in the chat or we may not see it. Instead, click the Q&A button and place your question there. We'll select your questions from the Q&A to pose to our speakers. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent to all registrants within the next few days. When it's ready, it will also be posted at nicasolidarity.net and on the YouTube channel of Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition. Please mark your calendars now for our next webinar to be held on Sunday, April 21st. Our featured speaker will be a government representative from the Caribbean coast discussing the recent elections in the Caribbean coast autonomous regions. More information is coming soon about that webinar. If you'd like to become more active in supporting Nicaragua's sovereignty and opposing foreign interference there, please join the International Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition. You can check the website regularly at nicasolidarity.net. Also, please put your name and email address in the Q&A if you'd like to receive our action alerts, the weekly newsletter, and monthly meeting notices. And here is a special announcement. The date has changed for the April meeting of Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition. Instead of the usual second Monday, it will be held on the third Monday, April 15th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll also enter some more information in the chat about other ways you can get involved or learn more about Nicaragua through a toolkit, the NicaNet email list, the weekly Nica notes, and several ebooks about Nicaragua. The format for today's 90-minute webinar is as follows. First, we'll hear from Nan McCurdy with current news briefs from Nicaragua. Then, after our four featured speakers, the remaining time will be for questions and answers. And now to introduce Nan McCurdy with news briefs. Nan is the editor of the online weekly Nica Notes published by Alliance for Global Justice. While she's currently doing development work in Mexico, she lived in Nicaragua for over 30 years and she still visits frequently. Nan McCurdy, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Barbara, and thanks to all of you for joining us today. The president and government of Nicaragua have decreed a national solidarity mourning on March 24th, 2024, in rejection of the terrorist act in Moscow that caused the death of more than 133 people and left hundreds injured. They express condolences to the Russian people and will hold solidarity events in all municipalities in the country. The national flag will fly at half-mast in solidarity with Russia. The representative of the Pan American Health Organization, Ana Elena Chavez, highlighted the advances of the Ministry of Health's new health map. She said, Nicaragua is leading the way on access to health. It is a health model that we have shared with other countries as we believe it is the best way. Working with families and communities is key to achieving these advances. The Ministry of Health alone cannot do it, and that is why we believe that the Nicaraguan health model is an excellent example, she said. The map contains information on the advances in the reduction of maternal and infant deaths. Every Nicaraguan should be proud of the creative progress shown with the map. Nicaragua is giving an important example of how to manage data and present it in an accessible way for the entire population. She added that the advances in the reduction of maternal and infant death reflect the commitment of the government. For example, in a comparison between 2022 and 2023, maternal mortality decreased by 18.9%. Infant mortality decreased by 17.4%, and neonatal mortality decreased by 23.1%. Nicaragua has a new medical liquid oxygen plant. The new facility makes Nicaragua the regional leader in medical infrastructure. In addition to producing medical liquid oxygen, the plant will generate liquid nitrogen with a daily production capacity of 20 metric tons and a liquid oxygen and nitrogen storage capacity of 650 tons. The plant guarantees a stable and safe supply of oxygen, complying with superior standards for medicinal use. During the neoliberal governments of the 1990s, Nicaragua sold its only oxygen plant, forcing the country to rely entirely on imports. Nicaragua has the capacity to export medical liquid oxygen and nitrogen to the entire region. Parallel to the liquid oxygen plant, a photovoltaic park was installed to generate 1.5 megawatts of renewable energy for the plant's operation, demonstrating Nicaragua's continued commitment to improving its healthcare system. The Women's Police Station number 300 was inaugurated in the municipality of El Viejo Chinandega and will serve 45,000 women. The minimum wage will be adjusted by 10.1% in the different economic sectors. The new agreement was signed on February 29th within the Tripartite Commission, integrated by workers, business owners, and the Ministry of Labor. With the signing of this agreement, more than 258,000 workers representing all productive sectors will benefit. On March 1st, Nicaragua filed a lawsuit before the International Court of Justice against the Federal Republic of Germany for violations of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, the Geneva Conventions of 1949 and their additional protocols in relation to the occupied Palestinian territory, in particular, the Gaza Strip. Germany cannot deny its knowledge of the gross illegality of Israel's conduct, nor can it deny that its knowledge gave rise to its obligations under international law to prevent genocide. Germany has provided political, financial, and military support to Israel, knowing that the military equipment would be used to commit serious violations of international law. The German government has also cut off assistance to the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East, the main agency delivering aid to the occupied Palestinian territories. I'll put the full article in the chat. And also related to Palestine, Nicaragua was reelected to the vice presidency of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People at the United Nations on March 11th. The Bureau is composed of Senegal as chair of the committee and the vice chairs, Nicaragua, Cuba, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Namibia. Palestinian Ambassador Riyad Mansour congratulated the elected members of the Bureau, expressing his appreciation to the committee for their efforts and work toward the realization of Palestinians' inalienable rights, including the right to self-determination, independence, and the right of return of refugees, stating that his delegation will continue to work closely with the Bureau to achieve these goals. He also stated that the priority continues to be saving lives of the Palestinian people and insisted that they will not cease in their efforts to get the Security Council to finally approve a ceasefire in Gaza. Costeños voted for more revolution and autonomy. With 99.2% of the ballots counted, the FSLN alliance of 9 parties, called the United Alliance Nicaragua triumphs, won with 88.95% of the vote in the North and South Caribbean autonomous regional elections. The president of the Supreme Electoral Council, Magistrate Brenda Rocha, also from the coast, reported the FSLN won an overwhelming victory. They were followed by the Constitutional Liberal Party with 7.83%, the Nicaraguan Liberal Alliance with 1.83%, the Independent Liberal Party with 0.76%, and the Alliance for the Republic APRE with 0.62%. The participation of the population eligible to vote was 48.31%. Rocha reiterated her congratulations for the participation demonstrated by the Caribbean families. She said that people went to their voting centers in pangas and cayucos, which are like canoes and made by the people, or on foot. She explained that 90 representatives of 30 districts were elected. That is 45 council persons in the autonomous region of the South Caribbean coast and the same number in the North Caribbean, with their respective alternates, with participation of 50% women and 50% men. Rocha pointed out that this process took place in an atmosphere of peace and tranquility. And I will ask you to please join us on April 21st, when we will hear more about the Caribbean Coast regional elections from a Nicaraguan. Thank you so much. Back to you, Barbara.
Thank you, Nan. You always have so much that's new from Nicaragua to present to us, but I thank you. Now we turn to our 4 featured speakers. The first of these is Becca Renk, a leader of the January delegation. Becca has been a community development worker for 22 years in Ciudad Sandino, Nicaragua, and a delegation coordinator through Casa Ben Linder, a solidarity project of the Jubilee House community. Becca, welcome.
Thank you, Barbara. It's wonderful to be here with all of you this morning. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can see just a couple pictures. I'm just going to give an idea of this delegation. We had folks come through Casa Ben Linder, and I'm going to go through what we did very briefly before the participants speak. So the delegation was called Power and Protagonism, Women in Nicaragua. The folks came from the 6th through the 14th of January this year. There were 14 participants from all over the United States. And we were looking at issues of women in Nicaragua. For example, Nicaragua is number 7 in the world for gender equality currently. Nicaragua is number 1 in the world for women in parliament. Nicaragua is number 1 in the world for women's educational attainment. And Nicaragua is the number 1 safest country in Central America. To look at these issues, first we visited a Christian-based community and shared a meal with women and men in that community, looking at liberation theology. We then had a tour of Managua and history of the country. After that, there were an exchange with community health promoters, learning about community-based healthcare in Nueva Vida, just outside of Managua, at a project where the Jubilee House community works and associated with our Casa Benlinder project. We went to the public hospital in Ciudad Sandino and visited a maternal weight home there to learn about women's health. We visited with the Ministry of Women. We also visited with the Ministry of Health and met with the health minister. We visited with the Commission for Creative Economy to learn about initiatives for women's work and women's entrepreneurship. We also met with the Ombudsman for Human Rights and the Special Ombudsman for Sexual Diversity to learn about human rights issues for women and the LGBTQ+ community. We went to the National Assembly and met there with women in Parliament to learn more about their approach. And we also met with women police to learn more about the women's police stations. Nan mentioned there are now 300 in the country. So we met with the head of the women's police stations, as well as other women police to learn about safety issues for women. We met with the Foundation Among Women in Esteli. We traveled to Esteli to learn more about agroecology and women, rural women and feminist campesina feminism. And we met with Las Diosas Cooperative, a group of a collective, a federation of cooperatives that works in coffee and honey. And we traveled on the bus a lot. We also did local shopping here for sunglasses and tried the drinks, the juice outside the hospital to see what that tasted like, and got to see some of the beautiful natural beauty of Nicaragua as well. So I'll now pass it over to our participants so that they can tell more about their experience in Nicaragua. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Becca. So our second speaker is Virginia Pratt, a longtime resident of Boston, Massachusetts in the United States. Currently, she's a social worker overseeing a small mental health outreach program for older adults. She's a peace activist with over 20 years involved membership in Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. She's traveled in Central America, Bolivia, Cuba, Ghana, Spain, Turkey, and the West Bank. Welcome, Virginia. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Well, thank you very much, Becca, for being one of the leaders of the tour. I would say that for me, there were 3 things. One was first and foremost learning about Nicaragua. It was my first trip to Nicaragua. And second, learning about the situation of women there. And third, learning about the participants in our delegation. I'm not seeing how to change my screen to the next screen. Okay, I guess I'll just talk extemporaneously. what impressed me the most about Nicaragua was the diversity in businesses, the diversity of income. I was very impressed with the city. I did not see any homeless people. Can somebody help me share my screen? Can somebody go to the next screen for me? Or not? Okay.
I suggest that maybe Yoav has your slideshow, so maybe if you don't share screen, then he could begin from where he is. Yoav, is that okay?
Thanks. Sorry.
Did you send me the presentation?
Yes, right before this started,
Okay.
I sent it to you.
Um, I didn't realize that half of the people in the country lived in Managua. I didn't know how beautiful the city was. I didn't see any homelessness there. I was very impressed when we went to visit the museum for Sandino, Blanca, his wife, where there was a talk going back to close to 100 years ago of 50-50 power sharing between men and women, based on the relationship that Sandino had with his wife. I was very impressed with the new parks that were built there, the area along the river, which is, we were told used to be dangerous and dirty, and now has miles and miles of places for people to enjoy themselves. I was very impressed when we went to the clinic at Nueva Dia with the passion that the woman who is the director for the outreach workers, there were over 30 outreach workers that we met with, that she has for her work, and that the team have for their work, and that these outreach workers on average had been doing the work for over 10 years, putting themselves in people's homes and meeting directly one-to-one and bringing them into services. When Becca had mentioned the church service that we went to, the person serving as minister there made many very impassioned statements about the situation of Palestinians. And I think for people in Nicaragua, there's kind of perhaps a natural solidarity in terms of knowing what it's like to be oppressed from a large oppressor, colonial oppressor. And I was very, very moved by that. I was very moved when one evening we went out, it was the last day of the trip. We were out for drinking and dancing along the river, and to see all these people just out having a good time. And I think that was a reflection of the affluence isn't exactly the word that I want to use, but that people have expendable income, that people are relaxed, that people can do that. And that's part of the quality of life. Parliament, over 50% of the women in Parliament, that's monumental. I mean, we don't have that in the States. Women very clearly setting an agenda, the agenda, reduction in poverty, increasing education, and human rights. Those are very important things. When we went to the clinic and the hospital, and we saw that, oh, I forgot the airport. When we saw that, that people had trained within the country and how proud people were of their hospitals, having an economy where I believe I was told that 60% of the economy of the nation's budget goes to healthcare. We don't have anything like that in the US. Those aren't our priorities.
Virginia,
Yep.
I managed to, can you see that your slides are on the screen now? I think they should be showing. Is there a particular one you'd like me to show?
I'll back up. I'll say anybody who's going to join a future delegation, if you're going to stay at Castle Benjamin, Linda, it's a wonderful place to stay. Very welcoming. Lots of murals, which we saw also everywhere. Well, these are, let's see, sorry. This, from the river, whoops. Also, I will say also the history of Sandino celebrated throughout the country. We saw so many statues of Sandino, but this was for me the next one. Nicaragua loves peace, number 8. To me, this was the take-home, one of the real serious take-home messages from the trip, that I felt that Nicaragua, I'm suspecting if I had gone there 10 years ago, what I would have seen and what I saw in January would be vastly different. And I think a lot of that had to do with Nicaragua having been at peace. It is the national priorities, but the combination of that and being in a peace time. This is part of that beautiful park. And this display right here with Jesus in the rubble, the solidarity for Palestinians. I will also say that I was very impressed when we went to the police station with domestic violence being treated very, very, very seriously by police. When they talked about how they investigate it, and they talked about how social services and psych services work hand in hand with police. And I think that's also part of taking women seriously and taking the situation of women seriously. This woman here is the woman who was in charge of outreach. When we went to number 14, please. When we went to the hospital that did the miracle eye surgeries, they now have most of their own staff, but it was originally a collaboration with Cuba. And Cuba, of course, is known for its outstanding medical care and sending medical care all over the world. And to see that they are now providing their own services to, that they are now fully staffed, number 14, please, that they are now staffed fully with their own people, was very impressive. The extent to which women are very much employed in hospital and government work came through with all of our visits. The fact that the country has a Ministry of Women, again, speaks to the commitment to women. Our visit to the creative economy, they talked about funding the arts, and they talked about targeted grants for projects for women and helping women have their own businesses, in addition to supporting technology, and offering in the country free education, which again puts Nicaragua miles ahead of the US. The visit to cooperatives, which is very much subsidized by the government and promoted by the government, was another opportunity for women, not exclusively, but we did visit the goddesses, who were are a women-led cooperative. And to hear testimony, particularly from a woman who is in her 60s, who could reflect on how different things were from when she grew up, and feeling ashamed and shamed about being an Indigenous woman and a peasant woman, and now embracing the term campesina, and how, because of programs offered through the government, she was able to become literate, to get a college degree, and to earn her own money was just so powerful. And that to me was an example of what it means when there's access to education, when there's empowerment. I was also impressed with the art, like when we went to the visit, the Femmes, that beautiful display where they were remembering Benjamin Linder. And even though he had died more than 20 years ago, and as a result of the Sandinista War, the Contra War, to see how he was remembered was very moving. I did not realize that the war had gone on for 10 years. I didn't realize that 50,000 people had died. I remember personally being very against the war, but I didn't realize the extent of the casualties and the length of the war.
Virginia,
Yes.
time to wrap up.
Okay, and the last thing I'll say is I loved all of the murals that were everywhere, which were popular education. And I apologize for the glitches in my presentation, but thank you for the opportunity.
And I apologize for trying to extemporaneously show the right slide at the wrong time. But anyway, I think you kind of got a sense of Virginia's presentation in any case. Wow, you all did a lot. And it's just amazing what Nicaragua has done for women, a ministry of women. That is incredible. Okay, well, moving along. Thank you, Virginia. Now we'll hear from our third speaker, Krista Chan. Krista is a proud Chinese American from the Bay Area of California in the United States. She currently resides in Oakland, California. She enjoys organizing her community on local issues and promoting peace across cultures. Krista Chan, you have the floor.
Okay, hi everyone. Thank you everyone for being here. I see some folks I know and a lot of folks I don't know. So really grateful that everyone wants to listen to me talk for 8 minutes. I am gonna go ahead and share my slides. And I know there's a lot of details to this trip that can be hard to keep track of. So today I'm going to stick to 3 personal takeaways that I had. Um, oh, the problem with full screen is that then I can't see what time it is. So just please let me know if I'm going too long. Okay. So these are my 3 personal takeaways I'm trying to talk about. The value of women who take pride in their work, holistic and family-oriented policy solutions, and just the importance of remembering our history and celebrating progress. Oops. Okay. So here are just a bunch of pictures that are going to help me jog my memory as far as what I want to talk about. But I think that for most of us who, I mean, I know people here live everywhere, but for most of us who live in the belly of the beast, and for those of us who are women, I think that we can relate to the fact that life is pretty exhausting and work can be exhausting. And I definitely feel that at times I wish my job was a lot more rewarding. So it was really cool to go to Nicaragua and just see a bunch of women in leadership who were so proud of their work. Like you could see it in their eyes, the way they talked about how they got to where they were. Really, really cool. So one example I'm going to share is when we went to the Casa Materna, which is the picture in the very lower left corner here. I remember them sharing like, okay, this is what we do for these women who with high risk pregnancies who come here, and we teach them different life skills. And one thing that was so cool was hearing them say that at that clinic they didn't have any maternal deaths for the past 10 years. And they were seeing really young cases like teenagers, 15 years old, going in there to give birth. And so that really reminded me of just some women in my life who work in healthcare. My own mom is a nurse. I have a cousin who's an ophthalmologist. And it made me think about the fact that like they're really proud of their jobs too. But one big frustration is because in the United States, they're always thinking about billing and like getting people in and out of the door quick enough. That's one major source of burnout, and it makes people feel like they're not connected to their work and they're not able to have the impact that they want to have. So seeing this and seeing the way their healthcare system works was just so cool. Some other examples, this photo here this woman is the director of the ophthalmology clinic. And she's pretty young, but she's the director of this ophthalmology clinic. And she talked about how, I don't remember what year, it was like 2006 or something, something very recent, where it was before that, all of their cataract surgeries had to get done in Cuba or Venezuela. But now she could very proudly say, people get their cataract surgeries done domestically, and it's primarily done by Nicaraguan doctors. And it's such a recent history, which was really cool to hear. This woman here was the director of the Hospital Occidental, I think, the major hospital in Managua, which is pretty new. Before that was the previous hospital, I think, was damaged by an earthquake. But now we walked around like it looks like a world-class hospital. And they gave us all kinds of stats on the amazing technology they have and all the different advanced procedures they do every day. So up here is a photo of the Minister of Women. One thing I thought was really cool was she's really young. She was about my age. But she's the Minister of Women for her whole country. And then here is a photo of Las Diosas Co-op. So they were showing us how they do compost, and just so cool to see them own their land. Like these women own their land and they do all the accounting, marketing, and all the agriculture. They do scientific research on their seeds. And these are peasant women. And down here is the National Assembly, which, as others have said, there's a quota, they have to be 50% women. So it's just really refreshing to see women be so proud, and it makes me feel like I want to be proud of my work too. And yeah, something that, you know, as someone who grew up in the US, I really don't take for granted. And it was really nice to just have this reminder of what it can be like to see women proud of their work because they know that they fought for it and it serves their community. Okay, so here I'm going to talk about holistic and family-oriented policies. So one thing that I notice is really different compared to the US with what major politicians talk about is they're a lot more upstream and they talk about like the root cause of societal issues a lot more. So I think Harold is here. If you're here, hi Harold. I'm gonna brag about Harold's daughter, Martha, who is in this photo at the bottom. So when we were at the Ministry of Women, I remember Martha telling us about the curriculum they have in school about domestic violence and how they would do role play around domestic violence. And so like that was so striking to me because in the United States, when politicians talk about women's rights, it's mostly about abortion and like having access to reproductive rights and also like identity politics, like making sure there's representation in power and whatnot, which I think are important things. But it was really refreshing to hear politicians talk about like the root causes of why this stuff happens, right? Like, why do women need abortions? You know, like, well, we have to address things like maternal mortality, infant mortality, domestic violence. And we have to address it in a family-oriented approach. So like kids have to learn about this stuff in school. So hearing Martha talk about the role playing that she did in school, like really confidently talking about a really mature topic such as domestic violence and how in school they would role play like what happens when dad comes home drunk and who do you talk to? Why does this stuff happen? I thought was really great. I mean, I don't know about you all, but when I was in school, I never role played this kind of stuff. We've just role played how to say no to drugs. And I also love that like the women police officers, they didn't, I mean, they did talk about their statistics as far as crime, but the thing that they were most proud of was prevention. So they were proud to say, oh, we knocked on so many doors and we did so many health fair clinics. And we're so proud of all the stuff that we've done that is preventative and that helps us get to know our community so that we can see right away if there are warning signs of a situation of domestic violence. And so on the bottom right is a photo of the ombudsman for sexually diverse communities. And one thing that also really striking compared to the US, so in the US, major politicians talk about gay marriage, how they want to protect gay marriage. But the ombudsman here, the thing that she was really proud of was an educational campaign where they distributed leaflets to different religious institutions to educate people about how to be more accepting of their sexually diverse family members. So one example that she shared was that they would tell families like, okay, imagine you have a child. They could be anyone, and you want to love your child no matter what. So like your child could end up being a robber or a murderer or something like that. And then they would kind of communicate like, just because your child is gay, like why, like your child could come out any kind of way. Like you want to love your kid no matter what. And that is just, I cannot even imagine the government like telling my family how to treat my sexually diverse family members. So it was really refreshing to see a more family-oriented approach like that. And then real quick, the photo on the upper right was the church that we visited. And I just want to comment that like a lot of people there had very visible disabilities, all generations there. and very accepted. Everyone just kind of knew how to be at church together, despite all these people with very, very visible disabilities, which I think I've been in a lot of church settings where that would have just been chaos and people wouldn't have known what to do. So just really nice to see how holistic and family oriented things were. And then I know I'm low on time, but this trip really impressed on me like the importance of remembering our history and celebrating progress. And that is especially because I think in the United States, living in the belly of the beast, sometimes we get a little used to losing. A lot of times in our reflections with our own delegation, it was a lot of thinking like, oh, I wish we could have this in the US. I wish we could have this in the US. But there's just a lot of reminders in Nicaragua, like none of their victories came about without a fight. And nothing, they don't take anything for granted, and that's why they celebrate what they have, right? So this woman on the bottom is the older lady from Las Diosas who Virginia talked about. Who talked about how she remembers a time where women just stayed home and made tortillas. And now she runs a whole co-op. And here Harold is telling us about Sandino, which I really liked learning history from Harold. And this is a photo of the war in Esteli. It was kind of wild to walk around Esteli. It's a really charming looking town, but to think like not that long ago, it was a war zone. So I really came home with a renewed appreciation for just remembering everything we have, even here in the United States, in the belly of the beast, just trying my best to celebrate the good things that are going on. And it was especially relatable to me because I now live in Oakland, and I've also used to live in Chicago. So I think folks who come from cities who kind of get a reputation can understand, like, we really try hard to promote the good things that are happening on where we live. It keeps us going, and it kind of prevents a doom loop narrative of, everything is terrible. And I think that's very important for activists and organizers and just anyone who wants to make the world a better place. Yeah, okay, that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Krista. I think many of us who visit Nicaragua end up feeling the same way, that why can't we have it where we live? But Nicaraguans have worked hard to create the society they have. So, okay, now we turn to our fourth speaker, Adrienne Ayers. Adrienne is a non-binary African student of ongoing revolution, born and residing on occupied Wawea-Tanong land, also known as Detroit, Michigan, in the United States. Adrienne is the founder and lead Reiki teacher at Heal in the Waters Wellness, which focuses on merging wellness with revolution. Their wellness, political education, and organizing life work is housed at Freedom Growers, FFG, on Detroit's east side, with hope that it can serve as a guide to the African diaspora for building strategically organized futures to maintain revolution for colonized people globally. Adrienne, welcome.
Hello, thank you for that beautiful introduction. You did great with the pronunciation, no worries. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me today. So I do not have a PowerPoint presentation, but it's okay. We're gonna go back to the land before PowerPoints, and we're just gonna talk, and I'm just gonna share, and I look forward to any questions that you may have. So I'm first gonna start with what even led me to Nicaragua, and the answer is revolution. The answer is, as I'm working with the people, what guide do we even have here to step into revolution and achieve it? We don't have examples here in the United States that are clear-cut because we have yet to experience a revolution, but there are places which have, such as Cuba, such as Nicaragua. And in order to understand some ways that we can move forward, it's important to go to places that have already achieved and are maintaining what we hope to do as well, even if the route there might not look the exact same. And so we have different conditions here. And so I don't expect revolution to look the exact same. And I also would also led me to Nicaragua is because it's important to understand that with the sanctions and embargoes going on there, those things don't stop if capitalism is existing. You have to dismantle that system in order to help those sanctions and embargoes to be non-existent at some point. And so we have a lot of work to do and a lot of responsibility here in the United States. And so those were some of the reasons that led me there to inform my work with the people through political education and organizing back home. So the next thing I want to talk about is what stood out to me. Many things, the healthcare system, the prioritization of women, our time with the co-ops, and our time with Parliament were 4 major areas that stood out. And I'll do my best to throw out some statistics that I thought were really moving and empowering, as well as some things that I noticed that relate to my work and maybe some other folks and how they approach things back home. And so with the healthcare system, first and foremost, the Nicaraguan Constitution guarantees free healthcare to everyone, like every last person. And I think that's amazing. I know free healthcare is something we've been fighting for back home. Imagine being in a place that already has that. It was mind-blowing. I've never experienced seeing it in action. So they guarantee free healthcare to everyone, and they prioritize vulnerable populations. So vulnerable meaning the poor, women, children, the elderly. And Virginia talked about this a little bit as well, but 60% of the national budget goes to healthcare, but not only healthcare, also education. And so I think that's really amazing seeing the children prioritized like that, especially coming from Detroit, where our government ruled a few years ago that it's not their right to make sure that Michigan children have the right to literacy. They said that that is not their right. So being here and seeing this was amazing. Now, specifically with women in the healthcare system, I thought it was amazing that midwives are already widely included a part of the healthcare system and are often known to lead and direct the birth. Here back home, we don't look forward to going to hospitals to give birth. That's just not something that is talked about. So many people I know are like, no, I have to have a home birth. I absolutely have to, because myself or my baby might not come out alive. And so imagining a system where the midwives are there leading the birth and you actually trust the people in the hospital. That's something that stood out to me. The hospitals are also equipped to support traditional birthing methods. So traditional methods for indigenous populations, African populations, where maybe standing up is the way that you want to give birth, or using birthing stools or other various methods. You know, back home, we're used to like laying down in a bed, which is honestly, from the studies that I've been reading and hearing about, that's not comfortable nor the best way to actually give birth. And so, yeah, young mothers have a high maternity rate. The surgeries are mostly maternal, and there are 181 Casa Maternas around the country, and they're always directly next to the hospital, and they're prioritized in rural areas. And just to give you a comparison, during the neoliberal years, only 50 Casa Maternas existed, and women were told to bring their own food. So let's think about that now, where 181 Casa Maternas are actually around the country. So in 2022, only 2 to 3% of home births were reported. 98% of births happen in the hospital. I think that's beautiful. They also have 191 natural medicine clinics and 151 out of 153 municipalities. As a holistic healthcare practitioner, wellness practitioner, this is something that I would love to see here at home, that widely spread and accessible. No one at all pays for services at the natural medicine clinics, and some hospitals include access to acupuncture as well. There are a total of 77 hospitals, 1,370 healthcare posts. And I know that Virginia and Krista talked about a couple of the stats with like maternal infant deaths and how things have improved. So yeah, in 2006, just to give some more depth, there were 29 infant deaths out of every 1,000 infants. But in 2023, that number went down to a 44% reduction. 2006, there were 92.8 maternal deaths per 1,000 expectant mothers. And in 2023, that number went down to 31, which is a 66% reduction. And so a lot of people might wonder how they're able to do so much with so little. How are they able to prioritize all these women and ensure all of these people have quality access to care? So a lot of that funding comes from donations from Japan and Korea. Their budget has grown over 60% in the last 16 years. It's been really beautiful to actually go there and see some of these things. Now with the Ministry of Women, Becca already mentioned they're number 7 in the country for gender equity, 42% of women in tech, 50% of women represented in roles deciding legislation. And I also just want to speak about how when we met with the Ministry of Women, they were really quick to explain that women's police station and the presence of police does not reduce violence, but they emphasize the importance of education to reduce violence, which is something that we see that they're prioritizing with over 60% of the budget going to education. With my limited time left, I really just want to quickly touch on the co-ops very briefly and our time with Parliament. I cried during our time with Parliament. It was the first time I ever saw someone who looks like me in a government position, that I felt actually truly served and cared about the people. So in Nicaragua, they have 2 autonomous zones specifically for Indigenous and people of African descent, Autonomous Zone 1 and Autonomous Zone 2. In those areas, African people get to create their own rules, regulations, and customs and have their own space while still coexisting with the larger country and population and still participating in general elections. African people actually have their own space to heal and be together there. We're spread out across the diaspora because of enslavement. And there's so much healing and healing we need and lack of understanding from other cultures who have not experienced what we have in the specific ways that we have and to the extent that we have. So seeing that there and seeing a representative there and seeing all of these people on Parliament listening to her and no one objecting and saying, we understand racism is global. We understand that everyone needs what they need for their people and to ensure the safety of their people and that their traditions continue. It was beautiful. And so I just want to wrap up and say, along with that, the co-ops, I asked, final thing here, I asked the co-op, what was the name? I have it right here. The Foundation Among Women said, well, how do we recreate these things to move towards revolution at home? And it's not just for us, it's to support the people back in Nicaragua, because dismantling capitalism means those sanctions and embargoes are also just being dismantled, right, over time. And they said, you have to have land, political education, and values. And those are the things that I'm taking with me to inform my work. How are we making sure the people here have a strengthened political will, have ongoing values being developed, and have access to land for food and to grow the things they need to together? How are we taking care of people in order to organize them and bring them into those things? And so those are the things that stood out to me. Thank you. I know that was a lot. All right.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. You really, your remarks touched my heart, actually. Okay, we'll go back now to Becca for some more remarks.
Thank you, everyone. I just want to close. I know there's a lot of information, a lot of statistics out there, and it's not possible to maybe absorb it all at one time. So I'm just going to put a link in the chat for an article that came out in Nika Notes a few weeks ago that has some of these statistics in it. If you want to refer back to it, there's the archive of Nika Notes is always a great place to look for more information. And I just want to thank everyone. I want to thank Virginia and Krista and Adrienne, and also all the other participants in the delegation in January, and also Harold, who co-led the delegation with me. I think that, it was a privilege to be able to have such a a group that was so interested and so interesting, that contributed a lot. And everywhere we went, Adrienne in particular would always ask, how do I bring this back to our revolution in the US? And you can imagine that Nicaraguans were so thrilled to have that question asked to them too, because it is important. Sometimes we look at things and say, well, there's folks who say, well, I'm going to go to Nicaragua and I'm going to teach people things. I'm going to go to Nicaragua and, and do something. And it was really wonderful to be with people who wanted to learn from Nicaragua, from the Nicaraguan example, and bring that back maybe to make change at home. Probably, that's where the focus ought to be, is, learning and maybe even getting a little bit of respite from the struggle in the US by coming to Nicaragua and being nourished by the revolution there, and coming, going back home to create change. So that was really wonderful. And I think I'll just end by saying that one of the things that, I live in Nicaragua and I hear these things all the time, but I'm also always affected by what is said in these meetings where we are and the things that we see. And, one of the themes that stood out for me was everywhere we went, every person we talked to, whether that was, someone working in, whatever position, everyone said that the most rewarding part of their work was in their communities. So that was everyone talking about the women's police, the women in the police stations, the women police, saying the time that's most rewarding for us is when we go door to door and do education and talk to women about their realities. And the Minister of Women said, my most rewarding part of my work is when I go door to door and I go out into communities and I talk with women and about what their real needs are. And that was said in absolutely everywhere we went. And the most important part of that, I think, too, is that everyone said, and we formulate our plans, our work plans in the government are formulated by our conversations we have out in the communities. And we are flexible. We make a plan and we go out in the communities and talk to women and discover that what we're doing isn't meeting their needs. We change what we're doing. And that's pretty amazing to continuously have that, that idea that we're not set in our ways, we're not coming in with the solutions, but the women who have these needs that we're trying to meet are the ones who are going to set policy for the country. That's pretty amazing. And even when we went to the National Assembly, they talked there about their idea of democracy being more than just elections. Their idea of democracy involves, in fact, they have regular sessions of the entire National Assembly where they go to a different city and sit down in some place in a city, and the public from that city comes in and watches them have their regular session, lawmaking session. And I would just like to invite the United States Congress and Senate to, get out of their chambers and go out into the communities in the United States and let people watch them work, and we'd see maybe if things would change there. So thank you all very much.
Thank you all. This has been a very inspiring and interesting presentation by everyone. We are going to need some questions, so we hope that you will put your questions in the Q&A. We do have one question here from Patricia Soto to start with. Patricia says, are the medical services moving more towards plants and holistic medicine versus traditional medicine? In California, I was able to heal my gallbladder issue via herbs and food. The doctors wanted to remove my gallbladder, but I healed it in 6 months, including non-alcoholic fatty liver. It was literally a diet change. So who would like to answer that?
I can speak a little about it because I think I had shared a couple stats. One moment. So I'm just going to repeat a little about what I said, and then Becca or Virginia or Krista, if y'all have anything y'all want to add to it, like, please feel free. So as far as holistic medicine, I had mentioned that there are currently 191 natural medicine clinics, and those exist in 151 out of 153 municipalities. So it seems like the access to natural and holistic medicines is becoming more accessible there. If just about all municipalities have at least one medicine clinic, and no one has to pay for the services there again. It's all free. And they're also making sure to incorporate holistic medicine as a part of the healthcare system in general. So people can also at certain hospitals receive acupuncture if they so choose. But I'm gonna stop there because I don't know anymore.
Yeah, I think that you know, there's a overall very large, very high levels of acceptance in the Nicaraguan population about all different kinds of medicine. So not just Western medicine, but also traditional and holistic medicine, and those are incorporated, like Adrienne was saying, around the country. We have you know, different medicines that are common traditionally in the mosquito population, for example, and the indigenous population on the Caribbean coast. They use those methods in the actual Ministry of Health clinics alongside the Western medicine. I know in the psychiatric hospital, for example, they have psychologists that are trained in floral therapies that use those floral therapies in coordination with the Western medicine and other sort of medications that the patients might be taking and might be prescribed. So that's very common around the country, to putting those things together so that working really to meet the needs of the patients in whatever way they can. And there's some patients who respond better with Western medicine, and some patients who respond with a combination, and some with more traditional medicine. But there's the actual herbal medicines and traditional medicines are incorporated into the medical texts that are used for doctors in Nicaragua. And there's not like a hierarchy of medicines. There's not a judgment about, well, this is science medicine and this is not. There's a real incorporation to try to use it together to best meet the needs for the patient.
Also, one of the hospitals we visited had a garden outside of the compound where they were growing herbs and vegetables, and so that could be a small part of that. And I believe we were told that the country now is growing at 70 or 80% of its own food. So just nutrition is part of good health. The country being able to feed itself, and also people embracing their agricultural roots, the campesinas, the goddesses who were so interested in not just growing the food that they needed for their co-op to make money, but also improving their farming and expanding what they were growing and having really high quality produce production.
Nan? You're muted.
Sorry. I have a very big question here. How does the government raise the standard of living of women in Nicaragua? And I would suggest that each of you maybe say one thing about that. And start whoever wants to start.
Well, there was a lot of promotion of small business, the free education, and also the culture shift. When we went to the Goddess Co-op, for instance, I remember them saying that very intentionally it was intergenerational. And part of that was they wanted people of different generations to see them working. And for the woman who was a spokesperson in her 60s, she said at one point, we were challenged and people asked, how were we going to do the work of men? And she talked about doing the beekeeping and how it was scary the first time, thinking about it and putting on the equipment and going in to tend the bees. And she proudly proclaims that they are doing this work. And so that's part of it is, I think, that shift in your head, that women can do these things. And so like when you say 50% of the parliament are women, women can do these things. And bringing people on board, the health centers, the hospitals, they have a heavy percentage of women, and not just in low-level positions. Women in many of the decision-making and prominent positions.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add about how you saw the government improving the lives of women? Krista?
One thing I just remembered, which I don't think others have mentioned, is that in all the municipalities, the mayor and the vice mayor had to be opposite genders. So one of them is always a woman, which I thought was really cool. And then another thing was the land transfers that the Sandinistas did. So they did a mass transfer of registering land under the names of women. So that's materially really supporting women and their economic empowerment. And one quick story I want to share is I asked the Minister of Women, how do men respond when you do this stuff? Like you move so many resources to women. And I loved her answer because she said, this is good for everyone, like if you're a man and woman household, if your woman can now own land and work too, be empowered to contribute to the family, it's good for you. So really any policy that supports people also supports women. And I could see that a lot throughout Nicaraguan society.
Thank you. And
Okay,
Adrienne?
Sorry. Really quick, I remember when talking with the Ministry of Women that they talked about how the government had created opportunities before the sanctions and even beyond the sanctions, for women to grow and be developed as it pertains to tending to the land and food, which I think is vital because with liberation without access to land or food, from what I've learned, much else can come from that. We can't really focus on education if we don't have any food. We can't, or have no place for the children to gather. So long story short, before the sanctions, they created opportunities for seed banks to be started. They created opportunities for the development of women farmers through the creation of market spaces for women to sell goods from their farm, as well as opportunities for women to receive a cow or pig and actually learn in how to care for the animals. I thought that was pretty cool, and those are things that still exist.
Becca?
Yeah, I just want to mention too that, all the poverty reduction really benefits women and benefits the economy, because you are not able to provide for your family if you don't, even think beyond running the country and coming up with policies if your kids are sick, if if they don't have enough to eat, if they can't go to school, if you can't get in and out of your home and get to where you need to go. So everything that the government has done is really focusing on poverty reduction, because this government believes that, basically in trickle up economics, if the poor are doing well, then the rest of the country will do well. And that has to do with women as well. When I first came to Nicaragua in 2001, under the neoliberal governments, everyone would tell me there's a lot of people working in sweatshops, in sewing factories. And what women would say all the time is, well, if you're over 35 in Nicaragua, you can't get a job. If you're a woman, you can't get a job. You can only get a job when you're a young, beautiful thing. And then once you start to age, there's no work for you. And I think that's something we can see very clearly is no longer the case in Nicaragua. But one of the things that has happened is that there is now women have access to not only learning and starting their own businesses, but also getting financing for it, because it's all well and good to learn a new skill, but if you don't have any money to set up a business, you're not going to be able to do it. So I'll just throw out there that 1.7 million loans have been made to 548,000 women at 5% annual interest under the Zero Usury program, which is specifically for women entrepreneurs. $422 million has been loaned through these programs, and that is a huge that's a huge success for women and for their families.
Thank you, Becca. Back to you, Barbara.
I don't see any more questions here, so I'm just going to offer a couple of comments and then I'll ask people for their last remarks. I think anything that you'd like to add to what you've already said. As Becca was just pointing out, the government itself has been so intentional about reducing poverty, and to have a national plan where that is at the center of it is just incredible. Again, I just wish we had that here in the United States where I live, but and you can see the results that in the time that the FSLN has been back in power, they have reduced poverty and extreme poverty by about half. And same thing when you look at maternal health and neonatal health. It's incredible what they've been able to achieve in that area, which is in direct contrast to what we're living here. I'm very, very pleased and impressed with what Nicaragua has been able to do just by taking the resources that they have, pooling them and using them in a smart way, instead of the way that some other places do. Okay, so I think at this point, we have just enough time for everybody to offer any last remarks of anything that you didn't have a chance to say or something that occurred to you that you'd like to sum up. I guess I'll go ahead and assign an order for this just to keep it simple. Why don't we, just the way I'm looking across my screen. So Krista, and then Virginia, then Becca, then Adrienne, and then Nan can finish up. So Krista?
Not much left to say other than just thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Becca and Harold, for leading us on our delegation, and everyone who called in to listen today. I hope that you got something out of it.
Virginia?
Well, one thing I forgot to say is that we were told that people in Nicaragua cannot own assault weapons. People can own a gun, but not an assault weapon. And that's something that I wish would be true here in the US, as we have a lot of gun violence. Lastly, I would encourage anyone to visit. I think that hearing about it is one thing, experiencing it is another thing. And especially if you have an opportunity to be part of a delegation. And you know, again, thank you to Becca and to Harold, because both of you were so accommodating, and being at Casa Benjamin Linda was such a wonderful place to be. And Viva la Revolucion. Good things are happening in Nicaragua. And I think that if people go, it's not that everything is perfect or they're completely arrived, but there's so much that's good. And I think it is something for people to see for themselves. And I would encourage people to do that.
Becca?
If you would like to do that, I did put in the chat the link to the Casa Benlinder website with more information about delegations. And we would love to see you all in Nicaragua. Thank you.
Adrienne?
Just gonna end with two inspirational quotes from two people in Nicaragua. One is from a member of parliament, and he said, "We don't consider the right to vote the only way to achieve democracy. It isn't obligatory." And from that, going into the quote by Dr. Ayers, if we don't have the support of an organized community, we can't do anything at all. And so just want to leave us with the importance of organizing. I think the people have more power than we realize to take care of each other, and to support each other. And so do what you need to do, but also make sure you work with your neighbors, take care of each other, and organize the people.
Man, you have the last word.
Okay. Thanks so much to our speakers. It was really good, really, really good. And I also want to give a plug to coming to Nicaragua, however you want to come, but certainly coming with Becca and Casa Ben Linder is a really terrific way to learn about Nicaragua. I also hope that you will subscribe to Nika Notes. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Yoav.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Bye for now. Come back April 21st for our next webinar.